What's up, YouTube? Capital G here. So today I want to talk about spellbooks, and I want to talk about the Prophecy archetype in the full shebang. Now, this is one of those decks that I think is a little underachieving, and I want to get views and opinions as to why you guys think that this deck hasn't broke through on the YCS level yet, the highest level of competition that we have, because, you know, a lot of us thought that this deck would have been pretty much going the YCS C-TAC in a prime position to, you know, really make a good push, make a stand, and make a statement about the deck itself. Now, when I look at Prophecy as a whole, the deck actually, like the way that its playstyle is and the way that the deck reaches its winning condition, it actually reminds me of two different decks, Agents and Darkworld. And I think that it takes attributes of those two different decks, despite the fact that they're vastly different in, you know, the way that the decks are structured and the way that the decks flow. And the reason I think the deck is very similar to Agents, because in an ideal situation, you almost always want to start with your really good searching card. You know, in Agents, you have Agent of Mystery Earth, and your Spellbooks, you have the Spellbook Magician. And then, for the most part, the playstyle is very similar to Agents. You don't invest a lot of cards on board. In fact, outside of the Spellbook Tower, this deck really doesn't put much of anything on the board unless, you know, it's that one monster that you feel really comfortable with, usually that being High Priestess. Outside of that, you know, you're not going to get a lot of aggro in this deck. I mean, outside of maybe 3 traps tops, that's pretty much all you're going to invest on the field, which makes things like Tragoedia really good, because even if you have a bunch of dead spell cards, obviously that just adds fuel to something like Tragoedia. I think the deck's reaching its winning condition is a lot like Darkworld, and I say that because it's boss monster or bust. You know, Darkworld's not going to win a lot of games if it doesn't either resolve a Grapha effect or get Grapha on the board. That's just the way the deck is structured. It doesn't have a lot of power plays. I mean, you can draw until the cows come home, but if you don't have a big beater to stop your opponent from wrecking your face, I mean, what are you really doing? You're just drawing a bunch of cards. And I think Prophecy is exactly like that, because, you know, I've played against the deck many times, and the deck has some really good plays. You know, I like the fact that it pretty much has Spellbook Tower, which I would only rank second to Gates of the Dark World as far as just, you know, impact field spell cards. I like the fact that the deck has its own Forbidden Lance, but the buck really stops at High Priestess. You know, I haven't seen the deck pretty much win at all when they don't get High Priestess on the field, and that's why I think the deck needs to hone in. You know, Cordero Vexicus, he made a deck where it was basically a turbo version. And I really, at first, I didn't understand it because I didn't know a ton about spellbooks. But when I really look at the deck and I look how the deck plays and when the deck is most successful, it's when you hit High Priestess early and often. You know what I mean? High Priestess is one of those cards where, considering you have your own Forbidden Lance to protect it, once it gets on the field, it's usually going to be a +1. A lot of times it can run things over because 2500 is nothing to laugh at, in addition to the fact that you have Spellbook power that makes it even bigger. You know what I mean? And the fact that even when it dies, you can just reborn it with Spellbook of Life. This is one of the reasons why this deck gives Dino Rabbit fits. I've been playing Macro Rabbit for, you know, guys, about the last month. Spellbook is without a doubt one of the worst matchups you will have, because, you know, you have a Logia on board, your opponent tries to inherently summon the High Priestess, and it's like, okay, well, you know, if I don't have Bottomless, I pretty much got to negate. And then it's like, okay, well, then they activate the Spellbook of Life, your Logia gets blown up, or your back row gets blown up, they attack over Logia, and you just lose. And D-Prison is absolutely useless against the deck, too. But back to Spellbooks. The reason I like Cordero's deck is because it focuses so much on getting those early plays, getting the Justice off so that you can get to your High Priestess very, very quickly. You know what I mean? And I think that's where this deck really needs to go. Now, I've seen a lot of people playing Reckless Greed, and at first I thought, yeah, but, you know, that it works out kind of well for Darkworld because Darkworld has draw power for days. But then I thought about this. You look at a deck like Spellbook where you can essentially try and do the same thing that Mermail Atlanteans do. You know, one thing that Mermail Atlanteans has going for it is the fact that you can never really blind MST against the deck, even though the deck only can run, you know, even though the deck generally only runs about 5 or 6 traps tops. Because if you blind MST and you hit a Bit Spear, then, you know, you're kind of screwed because they end up going +1 on you. This deck could essentially do the same thing. Like, let's say, for example, you just played Reckless Greeds, which can obviously help you get to your High Priestess faster. If you're not drawing High Priestess, then obviously you're going to draw, like, Justice, or you're going to draw, one of the cards that can either get you your High Priestess or get you one back that's already died. Well, if you mix in something like Torrential Tribute, that seems like a really good trap lineup. Because, again, we've already established that you're not committing much to the field. So if your opponent blind MSTs you and you chain Reckless Greed, you're in a really good position. But if they realize you're playing a very low trap count and that you're also playing Torrentials, then they're kind of like in a catch-22 of they can't really blind MST, and that can really help this deck out. Now, the reason I actually like Reckless Greed in this deck is because the Spellbook Tower. If the deck didn't have Spellbook Tower, I wouldn't say run Reckless because, then you just stall out too much. But the fact is, every single turn, much like Gate to the Dark World, you should be drawing a card off of this unless your opponent MSTs it and, disrupts the timing. But outside of that, Spellbook Tower is one of those cards where once you get it on the field, you should draw a card every single time because you should be using a Spellbook every single turn. Now, one problem that this deck does have is Thunder King Ryo can be a serious problem for the deck. Obviously, it shuts down Spellbook of Secrets, which is one of the best cards in the deck. It shuts down your Spellbook Magician, and that's why a lot of people have opted to run Tragoedia, because it just runs over that, you know what I mean? It almost makes me think that Breaker might be near staple. I know that Breaker, it can suffer in certain matchups, like maybe against Agents and, Mermaid Atlanteans, but in other matchups, like against anything machine-based, against Dino Rabbit, obviously, and against windups, you know what I mean? Breaker can be a really tough out because chances are, if you summon it, your opponent's probably going to be more likely to use something like Bottomless Trap Hole versus Burn a Warning on it. Maybe you have that Spellbook of Wisdom, and you can put in a lot of damage picking off those back rows. In addition, it clashes with Thunder King Ryo, which is huge because, we've already established that Thunder King Ryo is a card that absolutely shuts down this deck. And I really wanted to talk about this deck because, I haven't been able to go to regionals in a little while, but I feel like if I can get my top with Dino Rabbit, this is definitely the deck that I'm going to switch to. So I want to know what everybody's opinions on Spellbook. I think that I really want to say that this is the deck flying under the radar. Like, I think that this deck has the potential to really be the 5th best deck of the format right now, maybe even as high as 4th. I believe that the way that this deck runs, it can easily be as powerful as a deck like Agents, in my opinion. So thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll talk to you later.